Arch. Right. Base. Right wheel. Arch. Right wheel. Arch. No guard. Halt. Ready. Base. Forward. Arms. Present. Colors.
Since 1954, Veterans Day has been celebrated on November 11th each year. Originally called Armistice Day, its purpose was to honor the armistice that ended World War I. However, it was eventually changed to Veterans Day in order to celebrate veterans from all wars. On this sacred day, Americans take time to pay respect to the heroism and patriotism of our veterans.
Each year, we take time at Hoover High School to reflect and celebrate as well. This year, we've obtained permission from a local documentary creator, Joshua Scott, to share some of his work. Joshua is the creator of a short film series entitled Memoirs of World War II. Since only 3% of World War II veterans are alive today, Joshua uses his series to preserve the stories of those who fought in the Second World War. Personal narratives are used to convey the experience and sacrifice of World War II veterans. You can watch this compelling series on memoirsofworldwar2.com or on YouTube.
Today, we are focusing on the unique stories of two women and their experiences during World War II. Women played important roles during World War II, both at home and in uniform. Not only did they give their sons, husbands, fathers, and brothers to the war effort, they also gave their time, energy, and some even gave their lives. Women in uniform took office and clerical jobs in the armed forces in order to free men to fight. They also drove trucks, repaired airplanes, worked as laboratory technicians, and did so much more for the war effort.
The story of Eileen Hall's wartime service is one of perseverance, bravery, and ultimately, hope. It would take her on a journey halfway around the world, but it all started in a small Ohio town when she met the man who would become her husband.
We just kind of hit it off right away, so then we started dating. It wasn't long after that till he was in the military. After he was sent in the service, I told him I'd always wanted to go to California, so I was going to get on a bus and go to California. And he said, well, on your way, could you stop in Oklahoma and see me before you go? And that's as far as I got. After I was there a week, we got married.
But the newlyweds' time together was limited. Only a few days after their wedding, Eileen's husband Ken was sent to Europe to engage in the fight against the Axis forces. But Eileen was not satisfied to sit and wait.
And one day I called the place where they were taking recruits for the Army. I really wanted to go in the Navy because I'd always been a swimmer all my life practically. And when I went down to register, I told him that, and he said, well, you have to be 21 to go in the Navy, but in the Army you can go at 20 if you have your parents' consent. So I went took the paper down to where my dad worked, and he said, well, I might as well do this or you do something else crazy. So he signed for me. So then, I enlisted and on my 20th birthday.
Eileen had been accepted into the Women's Army Corps, also known as the WACs. Even in the earliest stages of her military service, Eileen refused to settle for average. She was determined to see the world and give her best for her country.
We had to take a test to see what we were qualified for, and I thought, oh gosh, I hope I don't get cook and bakery. But I was always a tomboy, and out of 85, 4 of us got chosen for the motor corps.
Now part of an automotive unit, when the opportunity finally came to go overseas, Eileen quickly volunteered and was soon on a ship to England.
I was stationed there for a year. I was the personal driver of a Jeep, and the 4 of us that were drivers all drove an officer, so we had our own quarters because we were on 24-hour-a-day call. So I was called out night and day and whenever.
Through character and a positive outlook, Eileen always had a natural gift for making friends, even among her commanding officers.
And at my 21st birthday, I celebrated in England, and my officer that I drove had a party for me, and all the party was there were officers. I was the only one that wasn't, and they were all celebrating my birthday. I don't think I'll ever forget that one.
But Eileen's time in England was far from routine. Although the British had held off the Germans from accomplishing a successful invasion, they still had to endure the perpetual threat of enemy bombing raids.
We could always tell when there was going to be a raid on the mainland because they'd all form over where we were. You could hear the motors going and everything. We knew there was going to be an air raid. And then after a year there, I was sent to the 23rd Base Post Office in Paris, France. While I was stationed there, I got a letter from my husband. He was in Italy. He was in the field artillery on the big guns. He saw a lot of things. He didn't like to talk about what he went through.
Eileen was thrilled to receive the letter and learn of her husband's location. But it wouldn't be until years later that she would know just how close she was to losing him. Ken was involved in 5 major battles on the Italian front. One night, he volunteered to cover the lookout shift of a fellow soldier who was too terrified to leave the safety of their foxhole. Ken had barely reached his post when the foxhole he had just left took a direct hit from a German artillery shell, killing every man in it. Ken was lucky, but there was still an entire war separating him from his wife. In December of 1944, with most of his forces in retreat, Adolf Hitler would rally every man he could to stage a surprise attack against the advancing Allies. The Battle of the Bulge was Germany's last major offensive in the war. The Allies would eventually achieve the victory, but suffered more than 80,000 casualties over 40 days of combat.
The Battle of the Bulge was over, but there were so many wounded soldiers from Belgium that they had to bring some into Paris. The hospital administrator called our commander to see if they could send some wax up to help them because they were bringing the soldiers into the lobby of the hospital and they just couldn't handle them. I filled up a 1.5 ton truck with wax and we drove to the hospital. Here's all the GIs on stretchers on the floor and you could just about walk sideways to them, and we just spread out and leaned down, and every one of the wax would, where are you from? Gave them water. Whatever you could do to make them happy, you did. And one fella had his leg amputated from his down here, and he was going to be sent home, and he said he hated to go home without seeing Paris. So I went to my commanding officer and told her the story. So she let me take the Jeep, 2 wax in back and me, and we go to the hospital and pick him up and took him all around Paris.
As the war in Europe came to a close and Germany finally surrendered, Eileen found herself right in the middle of the celebration in Paris.
The parade was something. I mean, they turned on all the lights and it was a night that I'll never forget, never.
For Eileen, the celebrations would be short-lived. Another letter from her husband Ken would reveal that he was now to be sent to the still ongoing war against the Japanese.
When I got the letter from my husband that he was going to be sent to this CB, the China-Burma area, which was still fighting, I started crying, and my barracks was below the officers, and she wanted to know what was the matter, why I was crying. And I told her I got a letter from my husband that he was going to be sent to the CBI, and I wanted to see him if I could.
Sympathetic to her situation, Eileen's commanding officer wrote up the paperwork assigning her to General Mark Clark's army in Italy. In truth, Eileen's new orders were just an excuse to get her to Ken.
A driver from our outfit drove me out to Orly Airport. I went into the office and told my story that I was trying to get to Italy, and he said, well, that plane out there is going to Italy. We'll hold it for you. One GI got on one side with his arm under here, and the other one on the other side, and they picked me up. They had opened the bomb bay doors. They picked me up and put me where the gun turret was, and that's where I rode. Then I got to Leghorn, and that was the end of my ride. That was because I didn't know where my husband was, but I knew he was in Italy somewhere. I started hitchhiking, and a truck come along with 2 English soldiers. I told them my story, and they said, well, we're going to Rome. You can go with us. They took me to the American Red Cross. They put me up for the night, and the next morning it was Sunday, and they were having a service. And so I went into the service and sat down, and a little bit later, another GI came in, and he looked at my patch, and he knew I wasn't from around there, and he says, oh, where are you from, and what are you doing here? And I said, I'm looking for my husband. And I told him my story, and he says, well, you just wait here after the church service. I'll go see my commanding officer and see what I can do. To make a long story short, he was allowed to take me. He found out that my husband was in Milan, and we were in Rome, and Milan is way up at the top. So he picked me up and took me, and we went through the Po Valley and the Apennine Mountains and arrived, and half an hour before I got there, my husband knew I was coming.
Nearly 3 years after their wedding, Eileen and Ken were finally reunited for the honeymoon they never had. Knowing Ken was soon to be sent to the CBI, Eileen was determined to fit a lifetime into those few short days.
They worked it out so that we could go to the 5th Army Rest Camp, and that was at Lake Como, Italy. And we had a 10-room villa all to ourselves for 8 days.
Eight days came and went, and soon it was time to once again part ways. Eileen returned to England, and after a few months was on a ship back to America. After 3 years of wartime service and a journey that took her across Europe, if only to spend a few moments with her husband in the middle of a world war, Eileen was finally discharged from the Army. She then boarded a train back to her hometown in Northeast Ohio. When she reached her final destination, there was a familiar face waiting for her.
When we pulled in at the train station in Canton, my husband was there. He got home a week before me. To be home again, oh boy, it was something. It was great. I mean, being together again.
The war with Japan had finally ended, and Ken was never sent to the CBI. The two were finally free to settle down and start their life together.
Eileen's courage is not something all of us can claim, and we want to thank her for all of her contributions to the success of the Allies in World War II.
Even if you aren't a direct part of the military, we all still have the ability to support our troops, much like Michette Tirafei Hyatt did during World War II. Michette grew up in Belgium and was only 5 years old when her country was invaded by the German army. Living under enemy occupation meant living in a state of constant fear of Hitler's wrath. Thankfully, Michette's parents knew the approaching danger and sent Michette and her siblings away to live with their aunt, far from the German-Belgium border. In 1940, Belgium surrendered, leaving Michette and her family under Nazi occupation. Here is her story.
You sort of live in fear all the time. So you're always afraid. What are they going to do? Maybe they're okay, they leave us alone, or they put us in the trunk and you're gone. You cannot even tell your family you're gone. Yeah, it's a world of fear.
In late 1939, all of Western Europe watched as their neighbors to the east crumbled, one by one, under the fury of the German army. The remaining free countries knew it was only a matter of time before they too would face the destruction of Blitzkrieg, Hitler's lightning war. As a 5-year-old girl growing up in Robertville, Belgium, Nellie Tirefai, known to her family as Michette, couldn't fully understand why her parents were sending their children to live with their aunt far away from the Belgian-German border.
My parents knew that the Germans sooner or later were going to invade, and they knew they couldn't. I was 5 years old. They could not escape with me. They had to move us to my aunt, who lived in Charleroi. I was going with my sibling. I was missing my parents. That's all I knew. Where is my mom? Where, children don't understand.
Working as school teachers, Michette's parents were required to stay put until the moment the Germans crossed the Belgian border. Once Belgium was under siege, they set out on a 6-week journey on foot, hoping to reach their children and the relative safety of Charleroi.
So they walked for 6 weeks, and the main road was bombarded as the Germans were coming in, and they had to hide. So my aunt thought that my parents were dead. One day, by miracle, suddenly they showed up at the door. So, everybody was in shock and happy, and they made it, but it was not easy. I cannot quite imagine what I went through.
The family was fortunate to be reunited, but Charleroi would not remain a safe haven for long. The Wehrmacht swept across the nation until May of 1940, when the Belgian army was forced to surrender. Michette and her family were now living under Nazi occupation, and each long year was harder and more terrifying than the last.
Some children really were starving, they didn't have enough food. Nobody was fat in those days, I tell you. You see them in the street, they were everywhere. As young as we were, we knew they were the enemy. So you're always afraid. What are they going to do? Maybe they're okay, they leave us alone, or they put us in the trunk and you're gone. You cannot even tell your family you're gone. Yeah, it's a world of fear.
The fears of the Belgian people were justified when they began to hear rumors of the fate that awaited many of those that were taken away, never to be seen again.
Many died there. Yeah, it was a horrific affair. That's what we were so afraid, to be taken.
After more than 4 years of living under the boot of Hitler's Third Reich, liberation finally came to Europe.
Well, the liberation was the best day of our lives when the GI came, Just to be liberated, that was really something. Couldn't believe the joy.
The streets that had so recently been occupied by the feared German army were now filled with American soldiers, battle-worn, exhausted, but friendly.
I remember the GI occupying a school because they had to stay somewhere and they were trying to meet families. So you could go there and sort of pick up a GI if you wanted to, if you see a guy you like. And we would ask, do you have a family to visit? No. Well, then you could come to our house, you know. I would sort of recruit, as little as I was.
Looking for a way to show her gratitude to her newfound heroes, Michette took to the streets and found 3 American GIs, hoping for a place to find some rest.
So I said, I'll go and ask my mom, you know. So I went to ask my mom, and she asked me how many, and I said 3. And she said, okay, they can come.
But when Michette returned to the same street corner, word of her hospitable invitation had gotten around. There were now 7 GIs eagerly awaiting the chance for a welcome into her home.
So I went back to the house and asked my mother. Oh, she said, it's okay, have them all come in.
Night after night, Michette's family would welcome groups of American soldiers into their home.
They would come in the evening to visit us, and they would bring us like candy bars, that type of a thing. They had pleasure in doing that, you know, especially for the children. They were missing their family, that's what it was. They wanted to have the family atmosphere.
To Michette, these men were not just heroes. Many of them were like her adopted older brothers, especially men like Adam, Jimmy, and Blair.
We hear a big noise during the night. Because he was a big guy, he cracked the bed and fell, and that made a big noise in the house. We figured, well, maybe a bomb fell on the house, you know, I don't know. That was so funny.
But her newfound brothers could not stay forever, and sadly, some of them would not survive the war, including Blair.
Because eventually they had to leave Belgium and advance into Germany, you know. And then that's where they had quite a few casualties there. Well, the Battle of the Bulge, the Ardennes, you know, had terrible battle there. The Belgian, a lot of American soldiers died there. They built a beautiful cemetery near Verviers, where hundreds of GI are buried.
The Henri Chappelle Cemetery and Memorial is one of 2 Belgian-based American cemeteries and the resting place of nearly 8,000 American soldiers who fought and died on Belgian soil.
I just love them for what they've done. American family lost their children. You should see that cemetery there. If you ever go to Europe, go to Belgium and see that. It's really, you won't forget it.
Michette will never forget the men who brought happiness and freedom back into her world. All of them were her heroes, and some of them, family. To this day, she carries a notebook filled with letters from the American GIs, expressing their gratitude towards Michette for her hospitality and friendship.
To my little Belgian friend, and many thanks for the pleasant evening that we have spent with you and your family. Dear little Nellie, many thanks to a charming little lady for many a happy evening during our brief stay in Verviers. Always I will remember your energy, spirit, and laugh. To Nellie, the most gracious lady in all Belgium, whose charm and happiness have made a home for all of us and have endured her forever within the deepest confide of our hearts.
After the war, Michette moved to North Canton and lived right behind Hoover High School. Her children also went through the North Canton City School District, allowing us to boast our own piece of World War II history.
These stories and personal experiences are the reason we celebrate Veterans Day every year. Whether fighting on the front lines, helping care for wounded soldiers, or staying at home getting the country back on its feet, we take this day to remember all those who helped preserve our independence and fought for our freedom. We want to thank all veterans in any war for their bravery, heroism, and sacrifice for the United States of America.
How can I be a good American? I know that I can be a good American because what I have learned from being in Girl Scouts. I started as a daisy in kindergarten and now I'm on my last year being a cadet. One thing that we never stopped learning is how to be a good American. We have our duty to God and our country. It's hard to say it better than the Girl Scout law. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. I will make America and the world a better place just by starting with my community. I can open my eyes to the needs around me and help out in any way I can. I know that this might not be the way that most people learn, but I did. Many of these laws are things that we have also learned in school from the 6 pillars of character. Respect, responsibility, fairness, and caring are a few of the 6 pillars of character that are also used in Girl Scouts. My grandmother, who was a Girl Scout, says that we need to develop a sense of duty and do it with care. Some people will think that their duty is going into the military, while others think that their duty might be more as a nurse, teacher, or pastor. All of these jobs are important in our society. To be good Americans, we all need to follow laws, help each other, and show love and care to one another. In summary, I have learned that being a good American can come from many things in life. Your job, the clubs you might be in, or even school. No matter where we are, the Girl Scout law and the 6 pillars of character can always guide our choices and behaviors. Being a good American means getting involved in the world around us to make it better. The things we do might seem small, but the effects can be mighty.
When I think about how can I be a good American, I first think about what it means to be an American. To be an American means to be from the United States of America. America was not by accident called the United States. United is and continues to be the key word. We are united in our beliefs. Our founding fathers worked tirelessly to establish what it means to be united. Through much discussion, dialogue, and debate, our founding fathers established a vision and belief that included freedoms never before established in the history of the world. Among those freedoms were freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and freedom of the press. However, most importantly is the freedom that people can be who they are and hold true to their own beliefs and are free to do so. In today's America, some might say that we have lost our unitedness. There seems to always be contrasting and differing opinions and differing beliefs that people hold strongly to and are committed to. Whether conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican, people always seem to be in major disagreements in their beliefs and values. It seems as if we are divided. In fact, some might even say that we are the divided states of America. However, I would say the freedom to express these differing views and differing beliefs is exactly what our founding fathers had envisioned, protected, and what has allowed America to be the most successful country ever. I've heard it said that I may not agree with what you have to say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. This is how I can be a good American. I can apply this principle even though I may have a different opinion than others and may not always agree with others. I can and should always respect their right to express their views in speech. After all, our founding fathers had the foresight to know the value of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and how important it would be to the success of our country. For our country to continue to prosper and thrive, as our founding fathers had envisioned, we all must come together, respect our differences, continue the dialogue and debate, and work together to truly be one united nation. This is my pledge to be a good American.
America is such a great country to call your home. All around the globe, every day people are wishing to have the opportunity to be a part of our country. Let's just be honest, America is absolutely great. But if you want to make our country even better, each day we can try to be good U.S. citizens. It's very easy and doesn't involve a bunch of thinking or many actions. There are many ways we can become good Americans. First of all, we can be good Americans by treating others the way we want to be treated. I know we hear it almost every day, but it's true. The golden rule is very important. We should never forget it because it's one of the ways to be a good citizen of America. If you don't want someone pushing you, then don't push them. If you want others to give you compliments, then give them compliments first. Such a simple rule that can change lives and build people up instead of tearing them down. Second example of how you can be a good American is by doing acts of service. Volunteering at a church to teach Sunday school to children or filling bags up with food for homeless people at a shelter are great acts of service. Service to your town or city is a fantastic way to give back to your fellow citizens in your community. Everybody loves being treated with kindness, and eventually when you show kindness to someone, they'll give it back to you. My final example for what I think being a good American can be is respecting everything. Notice how I said everything instead of everyone. Like when the Star-Spangled Banner is playing, be respectful and pay attention to the song. Or the next time you say the Pledge of Allegiance, be meaningful with your words. Being respectful is very important in any situation possible. Respect for others is how you're going to succeed in life. Being an American means a lot to people, and living in the USA is such a great privilege. We should not take it for granted. This is why I'm telling you this. Just be a good person.
Some days I think, how can I be a good American? While pondering this question, my great-grandfather often comes to mind. He was a great man and an even better American. Looking at him as an example, I learned to be a good American means to be kind to everyone you meet, honor those that served, and work hard. That was my great-grandfather to a T. He lived to be almost 90 years old, and at his funeral this past June, there were so many friends and family who came to say goodbye and share their stories with us. They all spoke of his kindness, which they will remember forever. Every time he was kind to someone, that person carried on that kindness to someone else, making their day a little bit brighter. I think that being kind can make our country more welcoming to outsiders. My grandfather was a member of the VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars, and was part of the Honor Guard, which participates in parades and military funerals. He did these things to honor those who gave their lives for their country. To me, remembering our veterans shows that we honor their service and we care about our nation. My great-grandfather was a member of the VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars, and was part of the Honor Guard, which participates in parades and military funerals. He did these things to honor those who gave their lives for our country. To me, remembering our veterans shows that we honor their service and we care about our nation. My great-grandfather worked very hard. When he was 10 years old, his father passed away, which left his mom to raise 7 children on her own. My great-grandfather's oldest brother had to go fight during World War II, so my great-grandfather had to step up and take care of the family. He had to get a job to provide for his family. When he was 18 or 19 years old, he went off to serve during the Korean War. Not many people have to deal with that at that age. By working hard, he helped provide for his family and his country. I believe that by working hard, it makes our country more productive and successful. To be a good American means to be like my great-grandfather. You have to be kind, honor those that served our country, and work hard. If you do those things, you too can be a good American.
Order. Colors. Shoulder. Arms. Right. Face. Forward. Arms.